everyone. Welcome back to Grief Out Loud. I'm your host, Janet Cristofaro. Before we get into it, I wanted to give you a quick content heads up. This conversation includes descriptions of domestic violence, stalking, and a violent death. Please take care of yourself while listening, and skip this one or come back to it later if now isn't the right time. Today's episode is about two sisters, Jessie and Molly, and what it's been like to live with the loss of their mom, Jill, who was murdered by Molly's father when Jessie was 21 and Molly was 11. It happened 2 days after their shared birthday, on the day they were supposed to have a party for Molly. For a long time, there wasn't space to acknowledge the trauma they experienced or even to really grieve for their mom, Jill. Not from the adults around them, not even really from each other. What they did instead was what so many people do. They just kept going. Nearly 20 years later, Jessie and Molly are starting to speak publicly about what happened and what it meant to live through the trauma of domestic violence and the death of their mom. Part of that process has included an unexpected discovery. 8 children's stories written by their mom in the 1980s. Stories that she had started to try and get published, and stories that Jessie and Molly are now working to bring into the world. This is a very tender conversation, as it's one of the first times that Jessie and Molly are sharing their story with others. But it's also part of a process of owning those stories for themselves, for naming what happened to them and their mom, and how that grief and trauma continue to impact them today. It was an honor to create space for that unfolding. If you are inspired, and I'm guessing you will be, to support Molly and Jessie in getting their mom's children's books published, you can find links to their work in the show notes. Okay, here's our conversation. Molly, Jessie, welcome to Grief Out Loud.
Thank you.
Hi.
Can you, just so listeners can kind of get used to your voices to figure out which one is which, can you take a moment to just introduce yourselves? And Molly, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm Molly. I am 30 these days, living in Salem, Oregon with my husband, Zach. I have a 2-year-old Otto and a 2-month-old Jilly.
2-month-old, and you're upright and recording a podcast with us. This is impressive.
Here we go. Here we go.
How about you, Jessie?
Yeah, I'm Jessie. I live in Eugene, Oregon with my husband, Matt. We have 4 kids and a delightful little dog who will probably try to hop on my lap and bark at us in a sec.
We will welcome his appearance if he shows up. So tell us a little bit about your mom. You know, Jessie, you knew her for 21 years and Molly for 11. How was she the same, but maybe also a different mom for each of you?
I would say she was really thoughtful, really generous, and really loyal. She was someone that you really wanted to get approval from. She was really strong. She was kind of quiet, she wasn't like the loudest person in the room, but I feel like she made her voice heard when she did speak. You wanted to listen to what she had to say. And as far as her being like a mom, I think she was at just every one of my extracurricular activities. She made a point to be there. She was a single mom essentially. And so I think that is a lot of dedication that she put into that. And I would say I got the version of her that was a little more relaxed. I was able to eat marshmallow mateys and donuts, and Jessie was not. She ate bran muffins for her special treats. So I got that version of her, a little more relaxed. But I also, I think, got more of the mom version of her. Jessie was a lot older when she died, and so I think they were, in my opinion, able to have more of like a friendship, whereas I was only 11 and barely 11. And so she was like a true mom. We didn't have like that camaraderie, I guess I would say, that maybe Jessie did when she was older.
So a more relaxed, easygoing mom, but still that parent-child relationship firmly in place.
For sure. And a really warm mom. My favorite memories were she would be laying on the couch and I would fit my little body between her body and the couch and we would just lay there and watch TV together for whatever we were allowed to watch TV for an hour.
How about you, Jesse?
Yeah, I would agree. It's funny, like reading back through her coworkers, they did a little dedication book for us after she passed of their memories and stuff like that. And everybody really wanted her to like them. It was like really evident in there, but you weren't ever really quite sure if she was sarcastic and she was kind of she was warm, but she wasn't gushy or like her compliments and her love were never forced and they were really true. So if she said she loved you, like she really meant it in that moment. It wasn't like an obligatory or like a this is what we say or do to make people feel better kind of thing. And while I did have more of the friend version of her, I feel like she never let go of the mom version. So I went to school my freshman year of college at Western Oregon University. So I was 45 minutes from home. I would still bring my laundry home every weekend and I had to fold the laundry, but like was not allowed to wash the laundry in case I messed it up. Or like one night I was going to go to the movies with my friends and she was like, well, you can't because it's raining. And I was like, I mean, it's always raining here, but, and I didn't go. I was like in college and my mom said I wasn't allowed to go to the movies because it was raining in Eugene and I didn't go. So she was for sure very much momish forever.
Momish forever. Are there parts of your mom that you see in one another as adults?
I think Jessie is also really witty, like coming up with names of companies and businesses and things. That's she's really good at that play on words and things, and that was something our mom was also really well known for. And Jessie can also speak her mind, which our mom was known for. In some instances, Jessie can just be really like bold in what she has to say. And I think that for sure comes straight from our mom.
Yeah, that is true in some situations.
It's very particular. It's like very specific ways.
I can hear her harshness sometimes when I get snippy at something that I don't know. I would say that Molly and I both, so I see this in Molly, but I also see it in myself. We have expectations of the way that the day should go. You do things at the same time every day. You have the same traditions every year. If you say you're going to do something, you meant that you were going to do that thing. And so I can remember one of my first fights when I first got married with my husband was I think we'd been married 2 days and we were getting ready to go somewhere and we were going to leave at 8:30 in the morning. He had laundry that night that he was going to do and I was like, well, you better get it done because we got to leave at 8:30. And he was like, well, I've got time or whatever. And he was still working on it in the morning and I'm in the U-Haul at 8:30 and he's packing his bag. And it was like 8:36 and I was just beside myself because I was like, we said 8:30 and it is not 8:30. And he's like, I mean, it kind of is. I'm like, no, it isn't. And it could have been avoided had you done the order you were supposed to do. So I feel like that for sure comes from our mom. And I think we both kind of are like that. But yeah, I would say our particularness definitely comes from her.
Well, I was going to ask you all what was happening in each of your lives at the time that your mom was murdered. But I'm also curious, what was your understanding of what was happening in her life at the time that she was murdered?
I probably was more aware of what was going on than Molly. I mean, stuff was happening to Molly, but obviously, I think my mom was talking to me more about the details of things. But then also looking back, it's obvious that I didn't really get what was happening or what she was going through. So it was in between my sophomore and junior year of college that things got pretty bad. I mean, I think we were kind of going on life as usual. Molly's dad had moved out. We lived in a neighborhood and then there was a big park, and he actually chose an apartment that was across from the big park so he could see into our house with, like binoculars. And he kind of was just doing stuff that I thought was weird. It felt scary, but like a little bit weird to me. I wasn't really quite sure. Like we'd come home and all the light bulbs would be unscrewed. He'd like leave a note inside, knowing like she was changing the locks. I don't even know, like weekly or something. And he would find a way to get in and let us know that he had been there. So things felt weird, but I do remember like right before she was killed that I told my dad, I think he's gonna kill her. Like I don't understand how this goes away. Like he's not going away. This isn't getting any better. And my dad was like, "Oh no, that's, he's just trying to make a show of things. He's not gonna do anything." And but after the fact, like finding out she had a secret bank account that she was putting money in for years under my grandma's name in case something happened to her, Molly would be taken care of. And we found a note in her sock drawer that said if he killed her, what she wanted to happen with Molly. And so there was obviously a lot going on that we didn't, I thought I knew a lot that was going on, but I think it's obvious there was a lot happening that I didn't really understand or understand the depth of.
So you had a general sense like this is dangerous. This could get really volatile. This could be really harmful. But you didn't quite get the details of what was happening.
Yeah, and I didn't have the tools to really recognize, like maybe you see a Lifetime movie and you think that domestic abuse looks a certain way, and that's not what it looked like for us. And so I feel like describing what was happening, like he's unscrewing our light bulbs, and then it's like, okay, I don't feel like I got the validation from other people. And it's not like, who do you tell? Like, it's not like I had a lot of resources of people to tell. But it wasn't like I got the validation, like, no, that's like he's abusing or stalking or terrorizing. Like, I didn't have that language or the tools to recognize what was actually happening. And I felt that it was scary and all those things, volatile, super uncomfortable. But I didn't really understand why because I didn't have the resources to really understand what was going on. And honestly, it was like I think I was 38 when Molly made me take some test that tells you if you've been abused or something like that. I don't know what the test is called. My world was wrecked realizing that she had been abused and we had been abused, and that it wasn't just weird, it was actual trauma. And actually, I think it was the first time I felt validated that, like, oh, what I felt was real. And it wasn't just that she was murdered and it was like an isolated event. It was, they were married for 16 years. I think it was 16 years of abuse that I finally felt like, oh, like that makes sense why I felt XYZ, or why I have a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of stuff that I just felt like was wrong with me for all these years. I'm like, oh, that was like a trauma response, but I didn't know those words and I didn't understand what had really happened to us.
So getting some of that language and a new framework or a new perspective really shifted things and understanding retrospectively what
Yeah,
happened.
yeah.
How about you, Molly, being 11 at the time that your mom was killed?
Yeah. My world at that time was really just me, I feel like. Like I loved my mom and I loved Jessie, but I was the classic 10-year-old who was like really just aware of myself. I knew that like our situation as a family wasn't comfortable. Our family being Jessie, my mom and I, my dad was I didn't consider to be part of our family. He was kind of other and separate. I mean I was aware that things weren't great and weren't comfortable, but I was mostly consumed with how I felt in our space of our family. I had just started 5th grade. I mean, I think I had gone to a week of school when it happened, and my birthday party was the day that she was killed. So I say we, it was Jessie and whoever else who were calling the pool and calling the cake place and calling and canceling everything and trying to get a hold of families to let them know that the party was canceled. And so right away there were so many like logistics that were being handled that wasn't what anybody wanted to be thinking about. And that summer I had gone to Six Flags with my dad, and I hadn't felt comfortable going by myself. And so I made sure that I had a friend there, and not only a friend, but a friend who had a cell phone so that I could like still get in contact with my mom if something happened. And I don't think that that's like super typical for a 10-year-old to be thinking about when you're going on vacation. So certainly things didn't feel stable. I think they felt tumultuous. It felt like sort of risky to be going on this trip, and it was risky. He essentially kidnapped me and hid me in Motel 6 in Eugene, and it took some circumstances for my mom to be able to actually find me and bring me home. Yeah, things were not comfortable. I would say it didn't feel like what I saw happening in my friends' families. It definitely felt different. It felt other. Yeah.
I will say though, for both on both of our behalf, that while that I think part of the confusion for me at least is that while that part of our life felt really confusing and unstable, my mom felt very stable. I think she did a really good job of being a source of comfort and stability and stuff for us, even while this other part of her life was like, I'm sure, consuming her thoughts and worries. And
She worked really hard to keep it separate for you all. Was that your experience, Molly, being younger?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like completely safe. Like I don't remember the light bulbs. I don't remember the things that he did. I just knew I felt really scared and uncomfortable being with him. But if he wasn't there, our house was safe and we were good and we were happy and our life was really fulfilling when it was our little world, just the three of us.
What do you each remember about the day your mom was killed? I know you've mentioned you both have the same birthday, September 10th, but 10 years apart, and she was killed on your birthday. What do you each remember about that?
Yeah, so our birthday is actually September 8th, but she was killed on September 10th, early in the morning. And so it feels like it was our birthday because it was the day we were celebrating. And so because of that, they're like really interconnected. We actually struggle now to celebrate big things because it feels there's so many emotions around that. So our birthday is September 8th and we are 10 years apart. So for me, it was my birthday was, let's think. Okay. For me, I actually went and spent the night at a friend's house on a Friday after school. So I waved goodbye to my mom and said I love you at the bus stop, and that was it. That was the last time I saw her. And I went home after school with my friend and spent the night there. And then the next morning, I think it was around 6, I my friend's dad came in the room and woke me up and said, "You need to come out here." And so I did, and my grandpa was standing there, and he lived in Corvallis. So he was 45 minutes away, and I was confused and shocked. And he said, "Your mom is dead. Your dad killed her." And that was it. That's all he said. He said it just like that. And I said, "Are you kidding?" And he said, "I wouldn't joke about that." And we got in the car. We got in the car and we drove the 10 minutes or whatever to our house, and we went through all of the caution tape and all of the news crews and everybody who was there, and pulled up to the corner right in front of our house. And I got out of the car, and Jessie was down the sidewalk a little bit, and we ran to one another and hugged and cried our little eyes out, and that was it. That was the morning that my mom was killed.
So you said goodbye to her on a Friday morning, thinking I'm just going to go spend the night with my friend. And then your grandfather shared the news very directly.
Very directly. It was his daughter, so he was doing the best that he could. That was all he could get out. I think he was doing his best.
And Jessie, how about you?
Yeah, I was working at Senior Sam's in Corvallis, and I had come home. I had been spending like every spare minute that I could at home that summer just because things felt really tumultuous. They were going through like a court battle over custody of Molly. He wouldn't sign divorce papers. And without that, she couldn't get any custody agreement. So, like, when he wanted to take her to Six Flags, my mom had no legal resources to say no. I mean, even getting her back was hard because of that, because there was no legal agreement. And so it was tricky to get her back. I was spending a lot of time at home. I was sleeping with my mom almost every night, which was very unusual because she is so particular. If you slept with her, you couldn't roll or pull the covers or do things that would wake her up. Molly will tell you that she used to come to my bed at night because my mom did not. It was really hard to wake her up, like if you had a bad dream, because you weren't allowed to stand there because that was creepy and it would scare. But how do you wake someone up without like startling them? So it was always like, are you sure you want to wake her up? So Molly would come get in bed with me instead. But anyway, so it was a big deal that I was sleeping with her most nights. So I came home. My mom had gone grocery shopping at Winco. And I remember in the kitchen, she just gave me a big hug. And he had followed her up and down the aisles of Winco from a distance. He'd been waiting for her in parking lots and stuff like that. And so this felt like one more step where he was like actually following her through the store. And she kind of gave me a hug and said something to the effect of like, he's just not gonna leave me alone, which she didn't really ever confide that kind of vulnerability. Like she would be frustrated or annoyed or whatever, but that felt like a little bit tender. And so she gave me a big hug. I can remember like we did the laundry, we did whatever. I was supposed to go on a date with my now husband and he forgot about it. So I got all ready for a date and he never came to pick me up. And we went to bed together. About 1, I was having restless leg feelings and I couldn't stay still anymore. So I knew I was going to irritate her. And so I went to my room, which was across the hall. And I remember leaving her bedroom door open and my bedroom door open. And at 4:30, I woke up with my heart pounding and my cell phone in my hand, like calling 911. So I must have heard something. And I looked over and her bedroom door was closed, but I could hear, like in my memory, it's like I felt like maybe the TV was on, which felt really weird. So I like must have heard some voices or something. But her bedroom door was locked. He had cut our phone cord, so I tried using our real phone to call our landline. Remember those? I tried using that to call 911, but that was cut. And I remember the panic that I felt in that because I wanted to call other help. Like I wanted to call someone else. I'm like stuck on 911, but I'm like, I want to call someone else. I don't want to be here alone. Um, and it would actually be really interesting to listen to the 911 tape because my feelings were that the woman was frustrated with me because I was so panicky that I couldn't really answer her questions, you know? And I remember her saying, like, if you don't calm down, I can't send help. Like, I have to know what's going on. And I'm just thinking, like, you have to send help. You can't tell me you're not sending help. But even then, I had the thought, am I making this a bigger deal than it is? Like, I don't know what's going on the other side of the door. Why am I panicky? Isn't the right word. Like, I always felt like I was exaggerating my life feelings and stories because of what we talked about before. Like, okay, so he unscrewed the light bulbs, but like the feeling that that gave me inside was never really validated by anyone else. So the door is locked. I can't get in. I don't hear anything, but I'm saying he's killing her. He's killing her. So I kept saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And she said, "No, not really." And then I thought he was slapping her. It was like a kind of like a belt snapping noise a couple of times, and that was it. And I had a key to her bedroom, you know, those little keys above the doors. And I had been trying that the whole time. And finally it opened, and she was facing me in her bed with her hand kind of covering her face. And so I thought, like, oh, he hit her and she's embarrassed to be seen. But I walked around to the other side of the bed and she was already dead. He had shot her and she had a door that went to her backyard in her bedroom. So he had gone out that back door, gone back to his apartment. And we found this out later, but on the way there, he called his grown daughter. He had been married previously, and had two kids. He called his daughter and told her what he had done and that he was going to kill himself and said goodbye. And so she called the police as well. And yeah, the 911 lady told me I had to check for a pulse, and I was like, I cannot. And she said I had to. And my flight or fight is, we joke about it, but it's not really a joke. My flight is so intense. I booked it out of the house so fast. I was outside. The neighbor, I don't remember this, but the neighbor thought that a cat was dying because they just heard this like terrible screaming. And so they actually were there before the police and waited with me until the police came. I will say I felt devastated afterwards because then of course you can't go back in. And that was it. Like I feel like my goodbye was the hug in the kitchen. I don't I mean, hindsight, like she was dead and not there, but I wish I would have given her a hug or stayed with her until they came, you know? Like I didn't really process, obviously, in that moment that was it, you know? And then it's a crime scene and you're not allowed to, it's not your house anymore, you know?
You're just acting on instinct.
Yeah.
There's no access to like, oh, if I do this, this is going to happen because you've never been in that situation before. Why would you know?
Yeah. I'm not the crier, so
Yeah, in my short time of knowing the two of you, it seems like Jessie, you crack the jokes to try to keep it a little bit light, and then
yes,
Molly
I
just
do.
holds it down.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
Well, I have two questions around that. What has it been like for the two of you having such a different experiences with your mom's death? Molly, like at what point did you know more of the story from what Jessie experienced? And how has it been for you to kind of hear her tell the story?
Well, that is the most emotional question of all. So here we go. I would say it's actually really challenging because I don't know the full story. It's all secondhand from Jessie, and so it was actually probably 8 years ago. The last time Jessie was living in Eugene, we were driving back from somewhere, started talking about our mom. Jessie actually lives really, really closely to our house growing up. And so a lot of the streets that we drive on are the exact same that we did back then. So I'm sure something reminded me of her, and we were talking about our mom and what happened, and I learned a ton more about what had actually happened because I was so young that it wasn't appropriate for me to know all of those things. And so I think I had filled in the blanks a little bit. I had made up what I thought might have happened, but didn't realize it. I thought that what my narrative was what had actually happened. And so talking to Jessie, and she's like, "Oh, this is actually how that went down," was kind of earth shattering to feel like I knew what had happened and had this story in my head for 12 years or something, and it wasn't it. And so that's happened frequently. When we talk about it, there's oftentimes a new detail or a new piece of the story that I hadn't known. And it happens currently now, especially as we are kind of reliving everything, talking about it so much right now. And so it has been really surprising every time. It kind of takes my breath away.
It's such a good reminder, Molly, that I think sometimes we assume that when someone dies, there's the story that we know right then, and then we just move forward with our grief of missing the person. But to think we can be reprocessing the actual death as more information comes to light, or we understand it differently as we get older. It might be the same information, but our perspective shifts in some way, and that's an ongoing process. And I think that gets left out of the understanding of what grief is like for folks so often.
For sure.
What did you each do with your grief, with the trauma, in the kind of days, weeks, early years after? I'm going to take a wild guess, Jessie, that there might have been some fleeing involved for you.
Yeah, for me personally, I mean, it was a wild couple of weeks of living in a hotel and I was supposed to start my junior year of college in Corvallis, and I didn't obviously do that, and we were putting the pieces back together. Molly and I actually ended up moving down to Ashland. My dad wanted me to live with him while I figured stuff out, and Molly came with me. So I feel like life was expected to just go on. And I feel like after those 2 weeks, it was like people went back to work. Molly went back to a new school. I had no purpose in my life. Like I sat around my dad's house and didn't know what to do with myself. So I did anything I could to not be sad, which mostly meant running. I would leave and go and go and go and go and go until I couldn't, you can't really cry and run at the same time. So it would make it go away. And I feel like we lived in pretend world for a long time until that kind of got normal. My dad is really good at big big distractions. Not great at like the day-to-day parenting. So we'd go on a shopping spree or go to Disneyland, and then be left alone, like emotionally and kind of physically, for months in between those big events. And so, we're at Disneyland pretending to be this big, happy family that's having so much fun at Disneyland, but really a month before our mom died or whenever it was. So I feel like that first year was a lot of pretending. I can remember being sick to my stomach the first Christmas. We were expected to go to my grandparents' house for Christmas. That's what we did every year. My mom's sisters were all going to be there. Everything was the same. And so I drove Molly and I from Southern Oregon to my grandparents' house. It was, about 4 hours, and just sick inside, but I'm sure joking and listening to music. And Molly and I did not talk about stuff. We also pretended with each other. And I mean, I'm not saying that in a negative way. I think that was like our coping skills. And also, you don't know, like, I don't know what she's feeling. I don't want to bring sadness to her or talk about things she doesn't want to talk about. And I'm sure she felt the same or whatever. It's confusing. I don't feel like the two of us had an actual support system to help us know how to navigate grief. And so I kind of feel like there was no grieving. I feel like we were supposed to go on, so we did. And like that first Christmas, we walk in and there was not a single word spoken about our mom. It's like it didn't exist. And I'm sitting in this room full of people, and everything's the same appearance wise for everybody else in the room except for Molly and I. Like, our key person is missing. And I felt like she just didn't exist. And I know that that was their way of also coping with it and dealing with things in their own way. But because of that, I really feel like I was one person before she died and another person after. Like, it's like I feel like I have two separate lives. It's been very interesting trying to meld those two worlds back together. I didn't start doing therapy until 2 years ago for this. It's been very helpful for me to work through that, obviously, but it's been really interesting to like tie those two lives back together where I worked so hard to keep them like, I'm this Jessie now and we're moving on and it's fine. And it almost felt like my old life was a movie. And so realizing like that was our mom, that actually happened to me, I did actually feel devastated. I don't want to admit that I felt that way. I don't want to feel that way. That's been an interesting process for sure to give names to the feelings that I've tried not to feel for so long.
So it seems like no modeling for what grief might look like, no invitation to talk about grief, no space for that.
Zero. Like, I don't think I'm exaggerating by saying zero. I don't feel like it existed for us. And I mean, even I wasn't that for Molly, like I wasn't a soft spot for her to land either. I didn't know how to be that. I didn't know that I needed it. I didn't know that I mean, I must have at some level, but I wasn't able to give that to her even being older.
How about you, Molly? How do you relate to this kind of progression from being 11 to where you are now with grief?
I think I would say my experience was maybe slightly different because they did put me in therapy. But it was like, let me just shove you towards someone that we know of. It wasn't necessarily like, let's find someone who you feel safe with, who you feel comfortable with. Let's find someone who's a good fit. It was, this is someone we have seen before. And I did not click with that therapist at all. I felt really uncomfortable actually with that therapist and wasn't willing to talk like at all. Like, I just said no words for an hour every week for however many weeks I went there. And there
Not just
wasn't
weeks. It was like a solid year of no speaking to her.
A year of silence.
but I think that goes to like they didn't know what they were like, nobody knew how to help us. Like, like it's not like it's Jesse's dad and his then wife were my caretakers at that point, and they knew that I wasn't talking, but it was like that was what I was supposed to do, was go to therapy. So I'm going to keep sending her to therapy for an hour, even though it's not doing anything. In fact, I actually think it was probably more damaging than anything. But that was like the checklist. Like, this is what, so it was like on a surface level, there was an acknowledgement that this is what I was supposed to be doing, but there wasn't like the deeper rooted understanding that but this isn't working. So we need to make some adjustments. And it's interesting that that was a priority for me as an 11-year-old, but it wasn't for Jessie. Like Jessie still had a parent at that point in her dad, but it wasn't something that she was pushed to do as if she was supposed to be okay. And we were just moving forward. So I think that that's kind of an interesting piece. But so for all intents and purposes, I haven't gone to therapy still. A couple times throughout my life, I've hit times where I'm like more emotional about things and think maybe it would be good if I talk to someone. So I have sought out a therapist 2 separate times in my adult years after that. And both times they have said essentially, you're doing okay. Like, let me know if you need some help. And I see them one time and there's no further follow-up or an interest in a second session or anything like that. So it's kind of been interesting on both sides from our family, but also from these professionals that I'm told I'm okay. And so I'm okay.
But to be fair, even with my therapist right now, she was shocked with my delivery. Molly and I can really talk about it in a very like, yeah, these are the facts. This is what happened. End of story. And I think if you take us at face value, it seems like we're somehow magically, you guys are just so amazing that this didn't affect you. You're doing so great. And that goes back to that validation thing that I have felt my whole life. Like you don't see what I am feeling. Like you don't get it. I'm not getting back what I feel like I'm asking for, kind of a thing. But it wasn't until my therapist started asking specific questions that she was like, "Oh, so you haven't processed any of this. That is why you could deliver it like this because you actually haven't grieved. You actually haven't processed this." And so I was like, "Oh, and here I thought somehow we were just unpenetrable. We made it through without any scars somehow." Turns out the scars were just way deep down, but that has kind of been a theme in both of our lives of just this missing like validation that, oh, that was actually a big deal. That actually was abuse. That actually affected you. Like, you know, I remember when Molly's dad kidnapped her and even now to this day, I'm like, do we really say the word kidnapped? Was it kid? Like, is that too dramatic? Is that too much? And I'm like, no, no, no. Like, that was valid. He took her and would not bring her back. The fear of maybe claiming too much or being too dramatic, I think has just been a really big theme in my entire life. I don't know if Molly feels that way, but
Jesse, it seems like for you having someone with some sort of like quote unquote authority to say you have permission to have emotions about these events that happened to you that were harmful, hurtful, and shouldn't have happened. Like that is what it seems like you really needed to hear.
I 1000% was like, wait, so that was actually trauma? And then she said back to me, like, yes, like you are allowed, you should be responding to this. It broke down walls I didn't know I needed that. But when she has like literally said those words that you are allowed and should feel something from these experiences, I was like, yeah, like that was real. I was actually sad. I was actually whatever. That quote unquote permission has changed my life. And I still have to ask her sometimes, like, am I being too dramatic about this? Was this really as like was it actually that bad? My stepdad when I was in between 5th and 6th grade was the first time I saw anything physical. I don't know if there were other times that I don't remember from before or things that happened in private, but he grabbed my mom's neck, and Molly was a baby sitting on her lap, and it was this whole big thing. But I was actually just talking to Kara, my therapist, last week about this. And she's like, so were you there? You know, you saw him strangle her. And I'm like, well, did he strangle her? I mean, he like grabbed her, but I don't know that he was strangling her, you know? And her saying that, I mean, she explained all these like scientific things that happen when you're in a protecting mode when you're a kid. Like I was helping to keep the doors locked after he left. And then my mom looked at me and she told me to run. And I ran to the neighbor's house. And Kara was like, of course. And I'm like, 30 years later, like, yes, that affected my life. Like that changed the way that I function and feel. And after that, it just, at the time, like there was no processing, there was no talking about it. It just life went on, and I was for sure trained by myself or what I saw around me. I don't know. To That's how you deal with stuff in life, is you just move on. Mm-hmm.
Molly, I'm curious, those times that you've seen professionals or even just other people in your life, is there something you most wish they would say to you that might open up that permission landscape for you to have your own emotional experience?
I don't know if I've ever been asked, like, what do you think you need? Like, do you think you need therapy? Because my answer is yes. That's why I'm there. Like, I wouldn't have sought that out as a 20-year-old or whatever, thinking, I don't think this feels right. It was just told to me from my recollection that, like, you seem like you're doing okay. Like, if things get worse, let me know, type of a thing. And I'm like, no, that I'm here. I'm letting you know. I'm here. But when I'm told, you look okay, like if things get worse, then same thing that Jesse's talking about. It's that question of like, well, maybe I am okay. Like maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. Maybe this isn't something that I need to process. So I don't remember being asked like, what do you think you need? And I think that maybe would have opened the door to starting to see someone earlier on. But what's interesting, I don't know if this is even going to make sense. Jessie was talking about how like she has to ask Kara still, was this a big deal? Was this whatever? And we're both really literal. And so the test she was talking about that we took was the ACEs test.
The adverse childhood experiences.
Yes. And I sent it to her and told her, or I sent it to her and told her to take the test or whatever. And she came back with a score that was lower than mine. And I was like, well, that's impossible because you were there. So no. And I had to say like, well, like be a little more lenient with yourself or like be a little more like flexible in the term of abuse or whatever. And she was like, okay, well, if I think about it that way, then my score is much higher. And so I think like we both just kind of have high standards for ourselves, and it felt weird to give ourselves the space to even think about things being as bad as they were. It was like we were trained by ourselves, I think, out of protection for, I don't know, protecting our image or our mom's image or what we felt like our experience was. It was like we looked at things in the most minor way possible instead of the magnitude of what they could have affected our lives.
And did affect your lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Good call.
I feel like there's so much more to talk to you all about this piece, but I really want to make some space for kind of why you're in this more public forum of telling your story, your mom's story, which is related to a discovery you made about your mom and the writings that she had been doing as early as being a kid, it sounds like. And so do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So After our mom died, we had like movers come in and pack up all of her things, and then they were just put into a storage unit. And they stayed like that for a couple of years until we were ready to kind of revisit things. And going through the boxes in the storage unit, Jessie found a manila envelope folded with all of the towels that were in our linen closet that held 8 children's stories manuscripts that our mom had written back in the 80s. So Jessie was finding these probably 2007, 2008, I would guess, and they were written in the mid 80s. And they were 8 children's manuscripts, each different stories, with cover letters that our mom had written to multiple different editors in New York, essentially trying to get her books published. And she had little notes on them that said like which ones would go where, and she had clearly put a lot of thought and research into which of her stories best aligned with these publishers and the stories that they were publishing. So there was a lot of intention that she put behind it, but that was as far as it got. They were still in that manila envelope when Jessie found it. At that point, it had been 25 years later. So they had been there for a really long time. And when I think about the timeline of her writing them in the 80s when Jessie was young to them being there in 2005 when she was killed, she'd kept this dream for a really long time. She had held on to it, and it had moved with her, and it still had value for her. It was still something that she dreamed of, clearly.
So you discover the writings, and then where are you all now with that?
So we are working with, okay, so we've worked with a private editor and we've kind of decided to keep it as if she was sending them, like as if it had happened in 1985 or whenever they're dated. She didn't do a lot of editing because she was like, back in the 80s, things were more lyrical. You would describe a lot more what was going on in the pictures. Now it's like the picture tells the stories with fewer words type of a thing. So she's like, these are very on brand for a book written in the 80s. And there's mention of like bran muffins and stuff like that, that she was like, nowadays it'd be avocado toast, but that was on brand for the 80s. So she said that's actually historical kid lit. So we're going to keep it basically as she wrote it with a few minor changes. So we're working with her. We found an illustrator that we think will vibe nicely. So right now we're just kind of working on funding and trying to, it's just expensive. It's an expensive process. We don't exactly know what we're doing. We're not writers or book publishers or anything like that. It looks like right now we're probably going to do self-publishing so that we can, when we were talking with the editor, she was saying if we tried to send it to a publishing house like my mom was trying to do, you lose control of your voice, like the editing, they can make any changes that they want, and you don't get to choose like the illustration vibe. Because it's not our work, it feels really important for us to keep it as close to what she was intending as possible. So I think we'll self-publish. So yeah, we are spending all our extra energy and time working on funding and trying to be more open with telling our story and being, I don't know the right word, but just more vulnerable with who we are and what our life has been like. And that's been challenging because, as you can imagine, it's not like we go around talking about this to everybody all the time. So that honestly has been an interesting process in and of itself, I feel like.
This might be a stretch, but in a way, your mom is helping you both connect more with your story, with what you experienced, with grieving for her by carrying on her legacy and finding a way to honor this creative part of her that she wanted to get out in the world?
It's been interesting the things that have unfolded, the connections that have been made, or I don't know. It's been an interesting process opening back up this box that seemed closed. And Molly and I have talked about this before, but it's not common, I would assume, it hasn't been for our story, you don't find new pictures. You don't make new discovery. When someone dies, like usually that's kind of it, And so to make this discovery and to feel like we're getting to experience a new part of her and how that is still impacting our lives in a new way, it's like it's been really, I don't know, just an interesting experience to kind of get something new when she's been gone for so long.
Molly, would you be able to share for listeners who want a chance to follow along with this journey of getting your mom's books published and just all the work that's going into that?
Yeah, so right now we are fundraising. We're doing a GoFundMe to help with the costs of the marketing and the illustrations and things like that. So we would love any support in that way. Her name is Jill Bartholomew, and that's what everything is under. We also are doing a benefit concert for her for 20 years. It's been 20 years since she died, and so we're doing a benefit concert, which will also be a fundraiser and benefit some survivors here in Corvallis. So we're doing a lot of things, opening a lot of boxes, and share metaphorical boxes, and sharing a lot about our mom that we've traditionally kept really, really private. So we're hoping that it will be a really healing experience to be able to have our mom's writing in our homes and for our kids to know, but also for them to hopefully be across the country and in other people's homes and get to know her voice in that way after it's been gone for nearly 20 years now.
Bringing your mom into the homes of others and reliving the tradition of the bran muffin.
Yeah.
In the 1980s, that brings back some memories for sure.
Yes.
Well, I will link to the GoFundMe and also to the benefit concert in our show notes. You all have an Instagram too, right? That where people can find you?
Yeah, it's called Barty Books. Like her last name was Bartholomew, and so it's a play on that, Barty Books. Yeah, we're sharing updates there about our journey, also just memories about our mom, things that we remember about her, and stories that we feel like sharing with everybody to help everybody to understand how much we loved her and how loved she was.
Well, I feel grateful to both of you knowing this is your first foray into the podcast world. And it sounds like maybe second or third foray into sharing about your mom so publicly, but not only sharing about your mom, but sharing about your own hearts, your broken hearts, and the grief that you carry and that didn't have a chance to be expressed. So it feels like a huge privilege to have been part of this conversation with both of you. I feel really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And listeners out there, again, all of that information to follow along with Molly and Jessie and their hope of getting their mom's writings published and illustrated will be in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. And just to thank you, listeners, for being part of our community, for making the show mean something, for sharing episodes with people who might be helped by what we're talking about here. You can email me directly at griefoutloud@dougy.org, and that website, dougy.org, is the main website for Dougy Center, where you can find all the information about our local programming, our free resources like tip sheets and activity sheets, and of course, each and every episode of Grief Out Loud. I'm always excited to share that the podcast is sponsored in part by the Chester Stephan Endowment Fund. Grief Out Loud is a production of Dougy Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.